So we have a pretty amazing guest joining us tonight. This woman has been through hell and back, and at a very young age. And despite all of that, she has turned her hellacious ordeal into something motivating and empowering and inspiring. And I know that you all will be as captivated by her story as Melissa and I are.
It's Tuesday, and you're listening to Murder Unscripted.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Murder Unscripted. I'm your host, Ed Hydock, along with my ride or die, Melissa Spivey.
Heyo.
We are in week 3 of 4 on our block entitled I'm a Survivor, where we're highlighting some pretty amazing survivor stories in case the name of the block didn't give it away, what we're talking about. And Melissa, I know you have a few that you're going to cover next week. And is it true that we might be having a two-parter?
You know what? We might. I have 2 really awesome survivor cases I want to cover, and between my difficulty making like any decision at all, coupled with the fact that I'm long-winded, we very well may have a 2-parter next week. But fear not, because if that's the case, we will release them both like in the same day. So nobody has to wait to hear them.
That's a good thing. We are looking forward to those cases. I know I am. But let's talk about today. So we have an episode that both Melissa and I have been looking forward to since the beginning, literally when Murder Unscripted was just a hope and a vision. And while we didn't necessarily know the direction of the show at the time, I always knew that I wanted to cover the case of Susan Woods, which I did last week. And that's a case I had field produced for Cold Case Files not that long ago. And it's very near and dear to my heart for a couple reasons. One is the storytelling. I thought it was one of the most well-told versions of this story that I'd ever seen, and I'd been a part of. The way we had it, we revealed certain things and held certain information. But the other reason is because of our very special guest today, Shannon Myers Barrientos. And as you'll recall from last week's episode, Shannon was also a victim of Joseph Scott Hatley, the same man who killed Susan Woods. So I am very pleased to welcome to the show Shannon Myers Barrientos.
Yay!
Hey, hello everyone.
Hello, Shannon. How's it going?
It's going.
Where are you at these days?
I'm in Houston.
You are in Houston. Very cool. And what's the weather been like?
Yeah, hot. It's been hot, and it rained a little bit, but it's been just hot. I mean, it's Houston weather.
Is that a dry heat? Like they say, like how Vegas is different than like where we are because it's so humid. So is Texas a dry heat, or is it?
It's very humid. I mean, it's very humid. If I go outside, my hair will go.
We've seen pictures of you from before, and obviously you had very curly hair your whole life. So I imagine
Yes.
humidity is not your friend.
No, it's not my friend.
Well, Shannon, before we get started today, I want to thank you because you have been such a huge supporter of this podcast from day one. And I don't know why, I don't know what started that, but I really appreciate all of the love you give us, especially online.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that being said, I wanted to ask you why did you agree to come on tonight? I mean, you've told your story now on several platforms, several major networks. So why us?
Why? I keep telling my story over and over again because I want to reach that one person that's out there that is struggling like I did as a teenager and like I did as an adult. That one person that is not being believed, that one person that needs that hope of, that's broken and that just needs that hope.
It's such an awesome message, and that's one thing we're hoping to do too. Obviously, we don't have that large of a following yet, but we're hoping to maybe give some insight to those people who don't get to see this side of things. So we're
Right.
kind of on the same path, and I think so much of you, and I want to kick off because the very first time that I had ever met you. So I had called you out of the blue and you agreed to participate in this show, but this is a memory
Mhm.
of you, my very first memory of you. And I'm going to tell you. So this is some behind the scenes information here, but when you agreed to participate, we sent you a list of questions that we were going to ask. And I don't remember if you requested it or if we offered them, but we sent you these and you responded to me with some notes. And I was like, the notes were incredibly helpful, but there were two comments that really stuck out to me. And I want to have you explain your mindset here, because the first was Joseph Scott Hatley was referred to, I guess, by a lot of people as Scott. So
Right.
the one thing you said to me was, please refer to Scott as Joseph Scott Hatley. So start
Right.
there. Why?
Why? Because when in Stephenville, he was known as Scott Hatley. Pretty much all of his life, he was known as Scott. Once he was released out of prison, he was known as Joseph Hatley.
Hmm.
So he like had two personalities, so to speak. So it was really important to me to even now today I say Joseph Scott Hatley. I don't ever call him Scott Hatley. I call him by his full name. So that was important because a lot of victims, they're like, no, the guy's name is Scott, and they only refer by one name
Mm-hmm.
because typically that's how you go by.
Absolutely. Well, and he definitely used both names, and I think that had to do with maybe hiding who he really was to kind of skirt the legal system as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you Googled his name, Scott Hatley, it brought up a little bit of stuff. But if you
Mm-hmm.
Googled his full name, it brings up so much. Back then before we started doing the shows and everything.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And so this was the other comment, and this was the moment that, one, I knew I loved you, and two, I got my first initial impression of you. So I had basically watered down the and it was exactly how I was going to ask you, but I softened the language. I think I asked you, like, what, talk to me about your ordeal, or something really soft in language, and you wrote back to me and you were like, also, I was not attacked, I was brutally sexually assaulted. Tell me why that was so important to you, because that's the moment I knew you were a badass. I'm like, she has a story to tell and she's going to tell it. I was so excited to talk to you after that.
So I'm sitting at my computer and reading your list of questions, and I'm reading one or two, and then I'll take my time, like, okay, that's okay. And then I saw that and I was like, really, really, and immediately made me mad. I'm like, this guy doesn't understand. You know, and I was offended by it. I was like, no, it's my I need to tell him. I need to educate him because yeah, I'm a strong person, but someone that's weak and everything, that was my mindset. Always helping the others and not helping myself.
Right.
And I was like, no, that I was not attacked. Attacked means that you were attacked and
By a dog or something, you
by
know?
dogs
Yeah.
or by a cat. That I was brutally attacked.
I did know, and I say I know, but I don't truly know. But I know from talking to other victims who have experienced similar things. So I did know, and I purposely softened it when I should have just came out and said it, and we would have gotten off to a much different start. And we got off to a great start anyway. That was,
Yeah. I
yeah.
didn't. I mean, like. I didn't take it personal. I was just like,
Hmm.
let me educate them, and everything. So it was just, looking back, when you and I reconnected, I always often, think about that and chuckle to myself.
It's funny.
Like,
I do too. It's really because now we know each other, and now it was all one big
yeah, yeah,
misunderstanding.
yeah.
So awesome. Well, I wanted to, if you're open to it, just walk through some of the key moments of the case with you. And you've told your story so many times. Our listeners have heard it from me last week, but also will want to hear it from you too. So this is not, I want to stress, it's not a television interview. So answer however you want. We're just having a conversation, which is what I
Right.
think is awesome about this. But let's start at the very top. And I know Melissa had some questions about some of your backstory.
I listened to your episode on the Stephenville podcast, and I was blown away by some of the trauma that you endured during your childhood. I mean, are you comfortable sharing some of that with us?
Yeah, I can share some of it with y'all. I think that's what made me a victim of Joseph Scott Hatley, was that I was molested as a child. And not only was I molested as a child, no one believed me, and no one saw the signs, and still today, I've kept it a secret, still, and I I'm not going to protect anyone's feelings anymore. I've healed from it, and I need to move on. The ones that did molest me are no longer with us. So they so I mean that's a healing part for me. Like I mentioned, no one believed me, and no one heard my cries for help. They just saw, oh well, here comes Shannon, the trouble child, and it's like, no, I am acting for a reason. I'm acting this way because I'm not, you know it's not right. I don't want to go to his house. I don't want to go to, on vacation, because of that.
How old were you, Shannon?
The first molestation started when I was 13. I was 13 years old.
It's awful.
Yeah.
Well, and it seemed like that became a common theme throughout this. I mean, throughout several instances with Joseph Scott Hatley too, where people didn't believe you, and we're gonna get into that, but it makes sense, you know. We're both Melissa and I are big believers that things that happen in your childhood do carry over into your adulthood.
How old were you when you moved to Stephenville? And when you moved there, do you remember hearing about Susan's murder?
So when I moved there, how old was I? I think I was 10. I moved back and forth a lot. So I think I stayed there when I was 12, 13, if I'm remembering correctly. And I didn't, Susan was not killed until I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
So I did hear about her murder, and I was, I remember going over to Regina's and hearing about it. I did not know Susan, and I lived in such of a sheltered world that it was only what was in front of me. I didn't really see anything else. I was just trying to survive.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because at that time I was still. That's when the molestation started more and more. It got more frequent. It happened way up until I moved here to Houston.
Unreal. So even while you were with Joseph Scott Hatley.
Yes.
Wow.
I can't even
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
Well, let's back up a sec. So when you mentioned Regina, so talk to me about how you came to know Joseph Scott Hatley.
So it was summertime. I didn't have a job. I was 15. I did have friends, but during the daytime, bored. Whenever next door, I knew Regina and Troy, and I went up next door and started hanging out with Melissa. Melissa, liked doing makeup. She liked doing the girl things, and I just struck up a friendship with Melissa. She was babysitting Regina's kids at the time, and it was just, I just struck up a friendship all around with her family. Joseph Scott Hatley came over, and I was like, oh, okay, he seems pretty, cool to hang out with. And he started paying attention to me, and he started listening to me like no one else listened to me. So that was a connection, and that I didn't have with others, per se.
Did the molestation that you were suffering at home impact your eagerness, I guess, to that attention you mentioned from Joseph Scott Hatley? Did that help kind of lead to that, or
Oh
precipitate that.
yes, most definitely. It led to that because I could escape that world and feel safe in Joseph Scott's Hatley world. And it sounds weird saying it now, knowing what all happened, but yeah, I most definitely escaped just survival mode.
How old was Joseph Scott Hatley when you first started? He was significantly older, right? When you first started seeing him?
He was 20, 21.
Okay.
I was 15, 16 when I first started seeing him. Well, 15 when I started seeing him, and then 16 um, when I stopped seeing him.
Okay. And did the age difference like bother you then, or?
The age really didn't bother me. It bothered my mother more than
Yeah.
anything.
I'll bet.
Yeah, it bothered my mom more. The age, it's just a number. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't, especially you're 15, 16, you know everything.
Mm-hmm. You sure do.
And you're
I
so mature at that age. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So when you started seeing him, would you describe that relationship as like a summer fling, or did you expect it to be anything serious or just kind of having fun?
I when I started seeing him, I didn't see anything beyond that. I was just,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's just summertime. We're seeing each other, and I was still going out with my friends, hanging out, having, because he couldn't go out with me, so I was still, hanging out with my friends and doing, you know, driving around the drag and doing, teenage stuff, living the life that that a teenager should live.
What did you like about him? Besides it seemed like it was partly an outlet from what you were dealing with at home. But also there had to be some good qualities. Like, what did you like about him?
Scott was really sweet. um he was very caring, very understanding. We would sit and talk about anything and everything. We had some long, deep conversations. He um he he was just a sweet guy. I mean, we dated on and off for about, when I was 15, for a few months. And then, of course, when I was 16, we went back together and we dated. On our dates, we'd go over to Regina's house, just hang out. They would
Yeah.
drink, I would drink. It was, just occasionally we went to Dallas together,
Oh,
and
wow.
we went to a few restaurants. Of course, we couldn't be seen around in Stephenville together
Right.
because of my mom, mostly. But
I
I mean, we
imagine
would,
word would have got back instantly if you
yeah,
were in that town.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So we went to the zoo. I remember one time going to the zoo with them, and you're just we would do most of it was outside of Stephenville.
Hmm. Well, yeah, you had to. It was just had to.
Yeah.
So what point so that this nice guy who he was sweet, he was all these things, and then you guys would date. So at what point did it turn ugly? Was there one moment, or did it just kind of fester over time?
When I was 15, I he we were at his apartment. One of the short times that he had his apartment, and apartment house. I don't really remember if it was apartment or a house, but he, lived by himself. And this was shortly after he killed Susan. I was there, and of course, we're getting intimate, and he held a knife to my throat. And I had my dog with me, and I was so scared that I was, what he was going to do. And that was the first sign of the violent side of Scott that I saw.
Wow. So that was the
I
very first time. I found
very much
I find that hard to believe. It's like something snapped.
Yeah, I mean, he would control, like he would, the controlling. Looking back, I can see it.
Hmm.
But when you're in that relationship, you can't see, you can't see beyond your, the love, and we make
Absolutely.
excuses, for
Mm-hmm.
that controlling. And especially me being 15, 16, of course you have all the excuses. And so I got away from him, and he apologized immediately. He goes, "I'm so sorry," because he did. I mean, I got away on foot and was walking back, and he apologized immediately, and I could see the the monster like was not in his eyes anymore. And so I knew it was safe to get back in the vehicle with him. Um,
Hmm.
and he took me home, and he kept apologizing, and we really didn't see each other that much after that, because that was the first time that I was actually hit by a man.
Hmm.
And I just and and also being held with a knife. That was the first time. It was scary.
Scary is probably not even the word for it. I mean, life changing, I would
It
assume.
was life changing. I was numb. I was thinking. I remember sitting, laying there, just crying in my sleep, and I was like, "No one's going to believe me. No one's gonna, no one's believing me anyway. So why should I tell?" And I did end up telling my mom, but it was a day too late. So we ended up going to the police station, and of course they, oh, it's just Shannon. It's, let's don't believe her. So nothing came about. They did go talk to him, and which just fueled the fire even more.
It probably made him angry.
Oh yeah, it did. It really did. And then his the stalking became, you know because he lived right next door. Well, on the weekends he was right there next door, and he would stay up at night. He would hear me coming in, and he would be right out there by the door, and because I would have to let my dog out,
Well,
or
yeah, you were trapped. You were literally
mhm,
trapped in your own home.
yeah, yeah. And anywhere that I turned, he was there. I went to the skating rink, he was there. I went, like I said, anywhere. It was just, I became where it was the norm, because I knew that he was right back there, you know, 2 feet, 2 inches, he was very close by every step I made.
I want to ask you something, and it might be the most difficult question I've ever asked someone in my entire career. First of all, I would never be allowed to ask this on a television show, and you can choose not to answer it. But I think you're a very real person with your feelings and your experience, and I think you'll also understand where I'm coming from and why I'm asking it. So, very few people have ever been raped. So I think that term is easy to just say and to think you understand what someone went through, but what does it feel like to be violated in that kind of way?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that, and I don't take offense to you asking that. If I had to compare the rape that Scott did versus the justice system, the family not believing me, the terror, the feelings, everything, all that outweighs the rape. It really does.
Wow.
You can, you don't know who to believe, who believes you. You don't know. Oh yeah, I believe you. Yeah, you hear all the right things that the people, whoever, your family, your friends, are saying to you, but deep down, their actions and how they care about you, and just their overall, you get raped again and again. I've always said that I was raped by the justice system, because the cops did not believe me. No one believed me, and the evidence was there. And that's what I can't really get over. because it created the mistrust, and it created a lot of things that I had to deal with along the way in life. And it caused me to have low self-esteem. It caused a lot of issues. The rape I could get over, not the way people react, and not the way people should believe.
And that's saying something. I mean, that's a very powerful statement, and that's a very powerful way to describe the aftermath and what you went through and how impactful that was. That even rape doesn't compare.
Yeah, even the
Crazy.
rape, the brutal, the brutal that violence that he caused. I mean, it does not compare to what I went through and what I'm still going through. You think, okay, well, she was raped at 16. Yeah, I was raped at 16. But how are you reacting to me now? You're still reacting to me the same way as I was raped at 16. You're still not believing me. You're still not, and that's what I have problems with.
Melissa and I talk all the time about this, how closure, I feel, is a word that is just thrown around, that I correct me if I'm wrong, but you will never ever forget about this. So you can close a chapter and maybe move on, but it's not something that I don't think you'll ever get closure.
Right. I agree. You will never get closure. When Don Miller contacted me about Susan Wood's case and everything, I walked him through. I remembered every little step, every second that it happened, and then some. Do I remember something that happened 2 weeks ago to me? No. But that I remember everything, and that's what a lot of people don't realize, that it's, sometimes it's the scent, from something that triggers a memory, or triggers, you have the triggers, and I have my share. I tend to hold them back, and I process it a little bit differently, but I couldn't, I still can't stand, water in my face, or somebody in my face. I haven't been able to get over that.
I
But you
don't
still
doubt
have
that. Yeah.
you still have your triggers, and one thing that I do have to say is that today's me, I will prove you 10 times wrong. If I know that I'm wrong and you're not listening to me, or you don't believe me, I'm going to prove prove it to you.
Yeah. I'm going to make notes on your questions list and tell you. Good for you.
Exactly.
Good for you. Well, and the sad part is the worst was yet to come. So July of 1988. So this is what, maybe 10 months or a year after the first attack, right?
Right.
So that second time that you were brutally sexually assaulted. So walk me through the day leading up to that encounter. So Scott, he'd been kind of showing up where you were. He'd been calling and trying to get you to what, just talk, right? And you finally gave in.
Right. Scott was very determined to talk to me that week, that night. He kept, like, having Regina call, having, hey, why don't you come over? And he was even showing up, you know, at the grocery store when we would go to the grocery store. I mean, he was even more stalking, as I would call it. He called me, and I wanted answers. I wanted to know why he did what he did to me, because you got to remember, I'm being molested, and I don't want to have that abuse anymore. So I want it to stop. Is it me? What am I doing to cause that? So I wanted answers, and where I could stop the abuse. And because I didn't want to, endure that anymore. So that was one of the main reasons I went with Scott, is to get the answers, in order to help me to. And he a weak moment, and I knew in my gut not to go. I mean, everything in me told me not to, and I just went with them, you know met up with him that night, and I regret it till today.
So around 10 o'clock, that's when time it was. It was late at night, and
Right.
so he picks you up. It was at you met him at a laundromat, I think I recall.
I met him at a laundromat. It was a few blocks from the house.
Mhm.
Met him there at the laundromat. He picked me up. As soon as I got in the vehicle, I knew I made a mistake. I knew that, this is not right. I saw the coldness that I saw, months back in his eyes. And I couldn't escape. I was frozen.
What was the vibe in the truck that night? Like once he picked you up?
He told me that he missed me. He told me everything that, that 16-year-old would want to hear.
Mhm.
And someone that's in love would want to hear, getting back with their ex. He told me everything. Said everything right, did everything right, but that little look in his eyes, I can look back and see that. And he we went to a roadside park where we have never been, but that was the road that he traveled back and forth delivering ice when he was delivering ice for his family business.
Mm.
So it was
So
familiar to him. Yeah.
I was very familiar. He knew that was a roadside park, that the road, you had to look down in order to see down there. So he knew, and it was in July, in the summertime, and it's dark, and he knew. I mean, there was not a light to be found.
Describe your emotions at this point. You mentioned that you knew instantly that you had made a mistake, but so you're pulling into this park, and I want to take it step by step, as not as if we were doing a TV interview, but just
Right.
I want people to understand this full story. So you pull into this park that you're not familiar with. It's pitch black. It's in the middle of nowhere. Describe your emotions. So what was going through your head?
Honestly, I was just such in a fog. I was in survival mode. I I really didn't put too much into it. Like, looking back, yeah, you see all the red signs and the red flags, and you're like, "Oh, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong." I just went with. I knew just something was off,
Mhm.
but couldn't put my you know finger on it.
Right.
Then, as soon as we got down to the roadside park, that's when the violence started. That's when he became real aggressive towards me. He started slapping me. He started raping me then, and that's when the brutal attack happened.
Did that start right when you parked the truck, or did something you say trigger that?
No, that started right when we parked the truck. We got out. He kissed me. I did tell him no, and especially that's when the rage started, and he just unleashed the monster that he was on me. And it was then no one teaches their kids back then how to survive this attack. What do you do? And then you didn't DNA is not as what's the word I'm trying to look.
I know what you mean. Like DNA wasn't even a
Yeah,
thing back then. It
prevalent.
was prevalent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, back then, so he I'm leaving clues behind because no one knew I was down there. My hair clip and my bra and anything that he could not recognize, I left behind.
I was going to ask you that later. That was the coolest part of the story for me because even at 16, you had the wherewithal after what you had just been through, after all of these things, and you had the wherewithal to leave a trail in case you were killed that night.
Yeah. I
Unreal.
really thought that I was going to be killed. He said to me, "Look at the stars. Do you want to become a star or something like that?" And and the way he was attacking me, I was in and out of consciousness, and and he focused on the face more than anything. And I I still I still think about it, about him hitting me time and time again. Why, you saw the pictures, Ed,
Mm-hmm.
how I looked. Why couldn't he have seen me? He could, my face should have been black and blue right then.
Yeah.
Melissa and I have this conversation a lot, Melissa, about people when you're attacked, the focusing on someone's face. It's almost like if I can't have you, no one can.
Right.
Right. And it's also, that's your identity, that your face is what makes you different from everyone else. So I feel like to attack that is just such a level of sick.
Right. Yes. When we got back in the vehicle, he told me to move over, scoot over, because I wanted 10 feet, 20 feet away from him. I didn't even really
Mhm.
want to get back in the vehicle, but I didn't even know where this location was at. So I got back in the vehicle and he turned on the light. Now, back then, the little bitty light was there on his truck, so he really couldn't see my face. And I had the sense to do this to cover the bruise and
Wow.
the bruises and the swelling and everything. And in one of the pictures, fast forward to when I was looking through the pictures, because I didn't get the crime scene pictures until a few years ago. And I was looking through them and I was like, oh my gosh, there's one picture that you can see that I kind of look the same way, and it triggered a memory. And I said, this was me. This was why I survived, because I did not show him my face, because he was looking right at my face when when wanting to see the bruises, the swelling and everything. And there was a little bit, but there wasn't a lot. But the way that I looked and the way that the light hit, I think this what survived, the reason I survived.
It's still incredible to me that a 16-year-old is doing this.
I was just gonna say, you are like the smartest 16-year-old ever. Not like to leave the evidence and to know to turn your face. Like I don't know that I'd be that smart now, let alone when I was 16. But like the evidence thing I think is so cool. I'm like, oh my god, that's so awesome that you thought to do that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know why I did what I did back then. I often, and I've said this before, that I've had, I think Susan was with me that night, helping me survive, or a guardian angel. Somebody was there helping me survive.
The one thing we didn't touch on is you mentioned becoming one of the stars, but didn't he at some point during that attack say, "I've killed before and I'll kill again," or something
Yes,
to that
yes.
effect?
Oh yes. No, he told me, he goes, I've killed before. This was after he raped me one of the times in that time span. And he said, I've killed before and I'm not afraid to kill again. You need to do exactly what I tell you. And I did. I didn't fight, because the more I fought, the more violent he became. So I gave in.
And how did you eventually get him to stop?
I started to turn the tables on him. I started to take control back and tell him what he needed to hear. I told him that I loved him. I told him that I wanted to be with him. Hey, let's go to Vegas. Let's get married. I told him exactly what he needed to hear. I showed him that I cared about him, and I think that's what turned is his violent off, so much, because when I started doing that, then that's when it started lessening. And then
Wow.
the fact that, he knew that he had to get me back in a certain time because of my stepfather. Again, he watched my house so many times. My stepfather woke up at a certain time. So he knew that he needed either one, he was going to kill me, or two, he knew that my stepfather would look in the bedroom to see if I was there.
When you were in the car, did you believe that he was taking you home, or were you afraid you were going somewhere else?
I When I got in the vehicle and I realized that we were heading back, I still had my doubt
Mhm.
that I was going to be back, and where he was going to take me. I was hoping and praying he would take me home. And the closer that we got, to to Stephenville, it felt, it was a 15-20 minute drive. It felt like hours. Each
Sure.
second was longer than the last. And when he pulled into the laundromat, he could have taken me home, but he didn't. He pulled into the laundromat and he dropped me off, and I never ran so faster than my entire life. You know, and I ran home, and as soon as I ran home, I mean, not my stepfather was walking out of the bedroom, and he said, "What the heck happened to you?" And I collapsed in his arms, and he ended up taking me to the hospital, and then that's when the second rape happened with the justice system. I'm not believing of what happened. And then the family members. I had one family member that said I deserved it.
Oh my God.
And so that hurts, that still hurts today, still today.
That's a horrible thing to say to someone.
Yeah, yeah. It's okay if you don't believe me, but don't say it to a victim.
So after this happens, and I think one of the things you promised him was that you wouldn't tell, you wouldn't go to police, but you did. So at that point, were you worried that Joseph Scott Hatley was going to come back for you?
I was very worried he was going to come after me, but I had to stand up for myself. What I went through and what I was going through couldn't be any worse, as I thought. I lost a lot of friends, a lot of family members because of the rape, and because of they didn't believe me, or I shouldn't have went there. I made a bad choice. Well, it wasn't my choice to get raped, and I guess I was focusing on more of that and living in that moment than the fact that this guy could have killed me at any time. But I think I took a little bit of more control back from him, showing, Joseph Scott Hatley, that I'm not scared of you. I'm not your victim. And I will talk. I will, because I didn't go to the police for the molestation. Could have, but I
Mhm.
did. And so I think me taking that little bit of control back gave me more power than anything.
So when he got arrested, was that like a big weight off your shoulders?
When he got arrested for the murder of Susan, I I was still a little scared of him, a little bit. Um,
And to be clear, 20 some years had passed at this point.
yes, yes. I moved to Houston. I lived lived under a married name, and I closed off all ties to my Houston friends. I mean, to my Stephenville friends. I didn't contact them, which we didn't have Facebook back then. So I closed off everything and I still lived in fear of him. So when he got arrested, I remember my husband he was going on going on a business trip, and I just had our daughter, and she was 6 months old, so somewhere around there, and she was still a baby. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, now he's in jail. But I still didn't trust. I didn't trust the system, because yes, he's in jail, but for how long? His money's going to talk. His family money,
Mhm.
his family power, and all those factors are going to talk. So I still lived in fear. When Miller interviewed me, I was still very, very mindful of it, and very, very fear driven, that I didn't want anybody to knowing where I lived.
Of
Mhm.
course. Who could blame you?
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to hit home is that when Joseph Scott Hatley had you down by that creek, that wasn't a short experience. I mean, he had you down there for a while, correct? And that plays a role later in the story when Miller contacts you because of the nature of Susan Wood's death, correct? So just tie that together, because you were a bit of a missing link.
Right. I was a very missing link when Miller interviewed me here at the house. He came down. I I was scared to talk to him, but Miller said to me, "Shannon, I believe you. I believe your story, and I believe you." That changed. That I mean, the second that he said that, I just, I was telling my story, but I knew that he believed me, and I knew that we're going to get Scott. He's going to go to prison where he belonged, and I knew that I was the missing piece to the big puzzle of Scott. And for Joseph Scott Hatley to go to jail, I knew that I had to do what I needed to do. I needed to tell my story. And Miller believed me, and I the evidence didn't lie. When Miller was listening to my story, in his mind, he was replaying Susan's story and replaying what Susan went through as far as the evidence goes. And then we filled in the gaps of how Joseph Scott Hatley how he brutally raped me, how he brutally attacked me, and that helped Miller get a better picture of what Susan went through. So the only evidence that is a little bit different is that Susan died and her body was in the bathtub, and I survived, and that was the only difference.
After you learned that he was responsible for Susan's death, do you ever think back and go, I could have been next? Like, I got lucky that time, but I could have been next.
Part of me, I don't think Scott would have killed me, and the other part of me thinks that I would have died. I think Scott had a connection with me, and I think he, sickly. It just sickens to even still for me to say this. I think Scott loved me, and I don't think he would have killed me.
Hmm.
Um, because of that love. I think I took the power back, and Scott was more afraid of me than anything.
That was it. That's one of the reasons we chose this block. One, because we wanted to feature Susan's story, but you as well, because
Right.
you have turned into this incredibly strong and powerful woman from the girl who was easily manipulated and taken advantage of, and that is the coolest part of this whole story. And I hope people can see what you've turned into despite all of this. So, but I'm sure it was a long road.
It was a very long road. The past few few years that I've been doing these stories and the TV shows, and I feel myself getting stronger and stronger. When I went back to the roadside park for the
You went back?
2020.
Oh,
Yes,
for the 2020. I was like, not
for
just
the
a visit,
2020.
right? Jesus.
Yeah, for the 2020, I went back, and I I faced I faced a fear that I could not have faced, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I would not have been able to. And I think that was one of your questions is, would you go to would you go back to the roadside park? And I think I told you, hell no.
Yeah, and I would have believed that. That would have been my answer. I know.
But it was the right timing for me to go back and to face that fear, that it held over me. And it's one of the triggers, that you hope that something holds over you, and that you just got to face it and move forward. And with, my husband and my family and my friends and my kids, they've been the biggest support.
What is it like? So that I assume you need that support less and less as you do these, but what does it mean when a show comes asking for your story? In order to tell it properly, you need to go back to those dark places and relive those memories. So what is it like to have to do television after going through what you'd been through?
I Going back, and now this was easy because I could talk about it and everything. It's pretty easy. We're not like deep diving into
Mm-hmm.
the story and everything. But like when I have to deep dive into the story, I do relive it over and over again. I relive it over and over again anyway through, in life, daily, sometimes daily, you know. But just to go back in there, I have to get my mindset back into that victim mode, as I call it. And it does take a lot out of me, from time to time, of going, like, even doing this. I I had to prepare myself, okay, don't say this, don't do this. I'm like, checking
Mm.
off the check marks,
Right.
and it it is difficult at times, but I do it because I want to reach that one victim, that one
Mhm.
person that needs to hear, that it's okay. That they need to hear that you don't have to be a victim anymore. You can stand up. And that is why I keep doing, the stories, and I hope that I can keep telling my story. And I, yeah, it's my story, and it's powerful, and but I still want to keep saying it, you know.
So I guess the bigger question is, what does it mean to you to be a survivor?
How that survivor word, it gets me sometimes because I still struggle with that because I don't feel like I've survived enough, if that makes sense. Like
I
I'm still
understand where
healing
you're.
from it. I'm
Sure.
still healing.
Mhm.
Will you ever heal? Do you think fully heal?
I think I have many closures. You I probably will heal when I have the acceptance from my family. I probably will heal when I have the acceptance from me. But I have healed a lot.
Did you heal at all when he died?
Yes, yes, I did. When he died, I was at work, and Miller and Hensley both called me, and I was like, "Oh
Wow.
my God, what do I do? What do I do now?" I wasn't afraid that Scott was going to ever come after me. Even being out of prison, I still kept my guard up, but I wasn't afraid. But when he died, it really changed me because how do you live without fear anymore? Because I live in Houston. I should be living in
Right.
fear, you know.
I wasn't going to say it. I'll let you say it.
Right? But I mean, it's just like, how do you live without fear,
Right.
and fear from one person, you know? It was a big change for me, and it made me feel like I didn't feel right for a few days, for a few weeks and months.
The big question that I have always had was, how do you experience what you went through and then go on to have a meaningful physical, emotional relationship with another man ever again?
When I met my husband, I've already been married and divorced twice. And when I met my now husband, we've been together 26 years, 27
Wow.
years.
Good for you
Wow.
guys.
Yeah, it's we I told him like the first 2 weeks we were dating, hey, I was raped. I was this. I didn't really tell him about the molestation until later, but I did tell him about the rape, and only because I still lived in that fear. And he was okay. We will deal with it, And he became a protector, and we've had our moments where I had to say, well, back away. I've got this trigger going on, or and stuff. But he's very understanding with it.
That's a good man
He's
there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I love going to the beach, but I don't get in the beach, into the water because I can't stand the water, and
Hmm.
he understands that. He doesn't he doesn't belittle me in any way. He's my biggest supporter. When I told him I was doing these shows, he's like, okay, and he gets excited about it, and he's there for me.
I just think you are so incredible. Like, you're such a, this is probably gonna sound terrible, but like, you're such a normal human being. Like, and you're just so powerful and strong. And the fact that you can get up, I'm just still so amazed that you were 16 and had to go through all this and then go talk to the police and the rape kit and just everything like that. To me is so horrifying that you had to go through everything you went through and then on top of it go through that with the police officers.
It still amazes me, even when that happened 30 years ago, that it still happens today. And I think that's what gives me the drive to speak out so much, is because it needs to stop. It really, you know, we're a victim. We're not, this happened to us because someone violated us, or me, whoever. And when I started doing the shows and speaking out, some of my friends and coworkers did not even know about this side of me, and and they're like, I never knew. And then my friends that I have reconnected with, they're like, Shannon, I never knew what extent you went through. And they apologized, and I accepted. We're 16, 17. I'm okay. I was okay with it, that they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what how people have walked, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I try not to judge so harshly, or so much. We're human, we do judge, from time to time, but you never know. And how what life that person lived.
So true.
I mean, if more people had that attitude, it would be such a nicer place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It really would. Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story again with us. And but before you go, I have a more lighthearted question that actually came from one of our listeners, from Aubrey. Her question is, what, if any, crime shows do you watch in your spare time, and how do you feel about the way cases are presented? Because some have recreations that can be tough to watch. So, how do you feel about some of the shows that are done?
I am a crime junkie. I love watching the shows. I will have to admit, I do fast forward to through some of it because of my triggers. I don't want to see it. But I
Yeah.
think it is very helpful like for people that are not sure about a victim, or I think it's more educational as far as like watching this, because sometimes it's like, oh, well, my niece is acting like that, my nephew's acting like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe connecting the dots. I think that some shows are better than others, as far as recreating it, the shows that I've been through that have been amazing. I do watch a few that I'm like, oh my god, that's too glory,
hmm
and
So I can't stand them personally. Like I directed them myself for years and years and years, but it wasn't because I liked it. I think that it's got to be tough for people, family members. Yes, they hear about them. Yes, they've heard the evidence. They've heard everything that happened to their loved one. But then to see it, I think there's some that
Yeah.
takes it to a whole different level. And I do enjoy when the shows do Cold Case Files. I loved because we did like symbolic recreation. So instead
right.
we showed trickling water instead of you being attacked in a creek. So that's my feelings on them personally.
My case, it takes me. I will watch it with a group, when on my shows and everything. But a few shows, I'm like, no, I'm watching by myself. I've done that.
Right. I totally get that. Oh, well, Aubrey, thank you for that question. And Shannon, thank you as always. Like,
Yes, thank you.
you're so great to work with and so pleasant and so motivating and empowering. I love your story and I can't thank you enough for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon, okay?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Whew. Well, that is quite a powerful story, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. It was rough, but it makes it so much more real when you hear it from the person themselves. And she's so brave to be able to not only tell it, but to use it to motivate other people. And even if she can just reach one person, like even just to pick up signs of abuse and get out of a relationship before it escalates, then I mean,
Yep.
what more can you ask for?
Give someone the balls to do something that they've been wanting to do for years. And maybe
Absolutely.
Shannon's what pushes him over the edge. So let's hope. So we're here. We're curious to see what you guys think. So that's going to do it for week 3. And feel free to hit us up. Let us know what you thought about Shannon's interview or any of the stories in this block.
Yeah, so you can hit us up on our socials. We have Insta, Facebook, TikTok. We are at Murder Unscripted. You can send us an email at murderunscriptedpod@gmail.com, or you can hit us up via our website, www.murderunscriptedpod.com. So everybody, we hope you have a great week. Be kind, be a good human, and remember, perverts don't wear signs that say they're perverts.
No, they don't. And I'm not going to make any snide comment. Not on interview week.
No, not this week.
No. See ya.
We hope you all enjoyed Shannon's episode, and the violence that Shannon faced can happen to anyone, but nobody has to face it alone. There's hope and there's help. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse or dating violence, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, or you can text the word START to 88788 for confidential support. You deserve love without fear, you deserve respect without harm, and you are not alone.
I want to ask you something. It might be the most difficult question I've ever asked someone in my entire career.
As soon as I got in the vehicle, I knew I made a mistake. We were getting intimate, and he held a knife to my throat. He just unleashed, the monster.
I'm just still so amazed that you were 16 and had to go through all this.
I was just trying to survive.
Do you ever think back and go, I could have been next?
I'm not scared of you. I want to reach that one victim, that one person that needs to hear, that it's okay. You don't have to be a victim anymore.